All right. So this is the 20th of March. So this is the SIG automation subproject for package specialization. So let me share my screen for the agenda. So that's what we had on the list, right? Actually, I got in the meantime a volunteer to actually co-lead. I got two. So I'll discuss with them and see how we take it forward. If there is more people interested, let me know. But we have to make a selection, it seems. Yeah. So I put two things on the agenda. One is to continue on the IPAM because I'm not sure whether we finalized it. There was then someone asked to get more detailed on the watcher because Google Seed Code has been uploaded. But I don't know whether we have people on this call who have info about it. And then
I think that I'll just say I don't have info about that, but Stephen plans to go through that code on Wednesday in the SIG automation larger SIG meeting. So, but if you need somebody to go through it in detail, probably Stephen is the one, unless we can get one of the, there's other folks at Google haven't been participating as much in Nephew, but wrote a lot of this code. We're trying to get them to participate. But
yeah,
busy now.
Yeah, I looked a little bit at
Stephen
the code. I looked a little bit at the code this morning, but I'm by far a specialist. But I looked a bit at the code, what it was doing. So yeah, at the bigger picture, I can probably discuss. But yeah, maybe I think it's better to have Stephen explain it. Probably it's better to do it for the wider audience potentially, and then we can then take it in more deep dive once needed. That was also my comment when people asked about it. So that's what I suggested, that we'll wait if we have the appropriate people. So we'll take that. And then the third topic that I added was a bit the approach. So I mean, it's based on some discussion that we had before, is like, what I'm still wondering or painting in my head, and maybe we have to make a decision on that, is that today in the hydration that we did for the POC, we actually had a first step. Actually, there were all these controllers, they run independently, but if you look at it, there was the first NF injector controller that basically it did two things. In my view, one, it reaches out to get more resources. So it basically was looking at the topology again and looking at the class, as far as I remember. And then it was expanding the deployment into various things, as well as started with the IP allocations. Now, so the reason why I wanted to discuss and is that there is potentially two options that we can go for. That depends probably a little bit on how what we can do with package variant set and package variants. So we could basically say, like, for example, all the IP allocations and stuff like that, you could already expand in the package. When you get the package, we could already expand all of these things, like, for example, the IP allocation and VLAN allocations. Let's say we have this abstract CRD, which at the moment calls network attachment. We could, one thing do is basically when the package gets built, because at the moment we are making a bit of an abstraction of who does that and stuff like that, right? But let's assume a package gets constructed, whether it's in one step or in two steps, you could actually write a piece of code that basically does that expansion already at the package layer. And as such, we don't have to do that in the specialization phase. And I think that's also a little bit what Aravind, when he started to discuss the the sequence diagrams was suggesting at some point to try to do as much as possible ahead of time. So that was that was what this topic is about. And maybe if it's not clear, I can maybe draw something on the fly. But these were the 3 topics that I had in mind for today. I don't know whether there is any other items to be added.
Well, I don't have other items, but I'll just say for that last one, yeah, in the package, in the other sub-project, package management, like definitely being able to do some injections in package variant set is the goal. So I think we probably won't need to do the copy the resource for pull in from the other resource, you know.
That part, that's one, right? So I think there we have a pretty good set. I think the question still, I think, John, is whether the functionality is there already, or we have to build it in
not,
but
no, we have to build it in. We have to build it in. I'm thinking to upstream it, but it's not there yet. We have it in the package deployment controller, so it's more or less bringing it over from there, and then probably writing some tests and writing some. There may be some day 2 type of things we need to look at, but yeah, most of it should be there. It's just not in package variant yet. So there's work to do.
Okay, but the question is for R1, can we assume it will be done? That's basically for me the biggest.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's one of the main things we have to do in the other.
Now there is 2 things. Maybe what I can do is maybe let me, where is this here? Let me maybe draw something just to make sure that everybody, not Google Drive, Google Slides. So the reason I think there is 2 things here, right? If I wait, last slide. Yeah, I'll remove all of that. So let me quickly draw something. So typically, so what we have today is what we discussed today in the CRD proposal that we have so far is we had a package. In that package, we will definitely have. Wait a minute. So we have. We will get. Wait a minute. So let me think a little bit whether I had it straight in my head. So it's package. So we get the package variant set, right? That has to be added. Not in the beginning, actually, but that was in the second step. Then we have a bunch of network attachment, as they call it right now. These are not multis, but they are regular attachment that are needed for the NF. And I think we have capacity for the time being, right? So these are the 3, and there is multiple of these. There is typically one of these at the moment, right? Okay. So what I'm talking about, I'm talking about is, let's say, when we get to the next item, what I believe we should get is all the. So these are, for example, there are a set of resources that we for sure need. Is I think the cluster CRD that would give us the cluster / maybe nodes or the node pool, which basically gives us the CNIs that are available to us, right? So that's definitely one that we need. Maybe there is others. So that is one of them. Now, what we can also do potentially is, and I always type it with an E. So this object here actually gets expanded into, let's say, IP allocation, right? So allocation and VLAN allocation. So typically for every interface, so when you looked at the IPAM that I was, or the IP interfaces that I was explaining, there is what we call these virtual network interfaces. There is this loopback interface, and there are these pool interfaces. So for every virtual network interface, we need an IP and a VLAN allocation. But for every loopback and every pool, we only need an IP allocation, right? But it's almost like a one-to-one mapping. So you could actually from this object, so there is two ways we can go about it. We could either say, don't do this, and we go straight here, but typically this basically includes some data also for example, SRIO. So basically here we also describe whether it's SRIOV and stuff like
So
that. We
I
need
think
later on. So this object is still useful, but we could potentially, given that it's almost like a one-to-one mapping, you could, the guy that builds the package, whether it's done in the first step or in 2 steps, you could actually already expand it at that time, is what I'm trying to get to.
right. Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. So the question for me then is, who knows what information is needed to do the expansion? Who knows it and when do they know it? And is it a different role, you know, who's creating the network attachment versus who's expanding? So the
Yeah.
answers to those questions, we can determine like where it should be done.
Yeah, so typically I was always imagining that all this IP allocation and VLAN allocation and stuff like that was for the infra providers, whereas the network attachment was a resource that was owned by the NF people, right?
Okay.
Now still, I think, John, we could, so what you could do, or I've been thinking about the following is like, we probably need anyhow a tool that basically is creating these packages somehow. I was imagining, because we kind of, at the moment, say NF topology and stuff like that, we don't really need necessarily.
Right.
But so you could write easily a script or or like a CLI tool or something like that, that takes the CRD, which used to be NF topology, and creates a package or a set of packages with all the package variant sets, with all the different objects, as well as the expansion. And we could do it potentially in 2 steps, where you could say, okay, the guy, so we basically build like this abstract NF topology, which is not applied to the cluster, but it's actually a resource that is a design tool. So we talked about a design tool in Nefio that someone takes, and basically that design tool takes that input and basically generates a bunch of packages.
That's a definite possibility, or we could use a function to take that resource that generates the individual resources. That's a good idea. We could.
Yeah, and these can be functions, right? So these can be functions, individual functions that tool has. So in other words, I'm not saying it should be one tool that does it all. The tool should basically use these functions to make that to make that happen. And as such, okay, that means that from the moment you do package management, we do this package variant set, we do this fan out, and then we do some functions into it. You almost have everything that is determined or that can be determined ahead of time, that is not linked to the location where it has to be done, is already there. And then during specialization, what we do is, okay, this is on this side, on this fabric, we allocate this IP or this VLAN, because that's the policy that is being used. So the only thing that we have to do is that. And then the second step is the NAD allocations just for the Multus expansion, but which basically takes the output that is generated from the IP allocation and VLAN allocation plus the cluster information. Then we take that to generate the NADs, which will be used for Multus. So in other words, the job that we will have to do in specialization, okay, I'm not trying to minimize it, I just wanted to discuss it, the different approaches, is then we just have to build the IP allocator, the VLAN allocator, and the NAD function, and that's it.
Right.
And
right.
And the deployment expansion we still have to do, because what I see is that the watcher is basically using that deployment as a single CR that does the expansion. So we have basically, instead of 5 things, we have to do 4. Not
no, I think that makes sense. But we sorry. Yeah, no, that makes sense, and I think it means I'm breaking up. No,
no,
so I think that makes
you're there.
sense. Yeah, so one of the things, okay, I think that sounds like a good idea. I just have to figure out what that means for a project like that authoring type of workflow, or that, like, we're not going to have, ideally, beyond R1, and we have like a Nephio UI that's very specific to Nephio, and it could provide a tool for people to interact with this package generation or package creation or package authoring type of flow you're talking about. We're probably not going to have that. Maybe just a function or two is all we need for now. We'll have to think about what those resources might look like. I like the idea. One of the things I want to do in the package management is take these CRDs that we've defined and kind of try to build the packages now to help surface all the gaps in what we need to do and how to, and then solve those problems. So that's something I'll be talking about. I think I'm going to set up a meeting. I think I'm going to set up a meeting tomorrow. I don't know if people will be able to go, but it's short notice. But people had asked me to do more than just wait until Thursday. But I'll see today. Anyway, I didn't mean to jump into the third topic now. If that's what you had wanted.
Oh, this is the third topic. This is the third topic, John. So this is the third.
Right. I know. I'm saying I kind of brought the whole conversation to the third topic. I don't know if that's the first thing you wanted to address. But.
No, I mean, I just had these three topics, but I think this is probably the more, let's say, urgent one to figure out, because that will determine what who has to do what, basically, more than anything else. So that's why I think this is probably I thought this was the more important one to flush out.
Yeah, but I think from my point of view, this makes sense to me. Like, to put this into the packages, I think it's less work for R1. We can always do more later if we need to, but I think this gets us where we need to be. So that I'm lined up with that.
And we could take some of the code that we had, which does that, because actually, if you look to the code, it was just looking at interfaces and just generating another object with it. And so you could easily do this with functions, fairly straightforward, in my view. But so what we can do, John, is or what I can do, maybe if you have a meeting tomorrow, is basically build a sketch of how such a package would look like, and this various steps, because there is actually three, right? Because the first package there is actually a step before this that does not contain this package variant set, as far as I understand, right? So there is a regular one, then we get this one, and then we get the expansions, right? So that we can, because I also believe that this makes it more clear to everyone what is happening, at least on the management cluster side.
Right. Yeah. Let's discuss it in the meeting tomorrow if you're able to come. I don't think we need. I think the package variant sets are going to live in the package that the user applies to the management cluster, and then they'll be expanded from there. But okay, this is looking pretty good.
Yeah, now you're breaking up, I think, John. I don't know, anyone else having a comment or a question on this one? Bala,
Yeah. So obviously, I think my understanding is not that clear at this point of time on this one. So are we suggesting that when we say making some of this as a part of the package, are we making it a part of a kept function pipeline?
So I think how to do that, we still have to probably flush out, right? What if you look to when we did the workshop, one of the items or one of the topics that was listed there is a design tool for Nephio. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, at that time, probably it was not clear, or at least maybe to me, I was also not sure what this was about. But already I could see a use case or a flavor of such a design tool in this package handling, right? Because at that time we were also not discussing the packages yet, but at some point these packages have to be created by someone, right? Or by a set of people.
Yeah.
And we kind of ignored, I think that was also a question when I presented it towards the SIG 1 release in that meeting, who is creating them? And we kind of said, okay, it could be done by the vendor, could be done by like a system integrator, or could be done by the operator, or a mix of those three, right? Now, if you look in this whole journey that we are going right now, then what I'm sensing, or where my theory is the following, is that the more you can do upfront, or at the moment you have the knowledge, let's do it at that point somehow, right? So that's a little bit the philosophy behind here. And as such, we could, I can imagine that we, because all of these things you can actually do from the moment you know the topology somehow, and topology, we are not going to make an active CRD potentially, but it can be an offline tool that does this. And as such, let's have that tool, which I hope would then act upon, which is a set of kept functions that gets executed, similar as it would have been approached online, because some people would like to make this an online version and some people offline version. So then we can decide whether it's an online or an offline version. If we all build that using kept functions, then it becomes a suite of things that you can then implement on how people think it's best for their environment. You see what I'm saying? So I would advocate to build this as kept function, but they will be executed ahead of time. Does that answer?
Yeah. I mean, wherever possible, right? Basically, taking the hermetic nature of kept functions, if it has to interact with some other entity, theoretically it could be done.
It's not true. Yeah. So this functions are explicit standard in, standard out, which means that the information that you have to use to, for example, create this ISO, so to create this IP allocation, I just need this thing and maybe the cluster, or even not so, right? Because I could build it in such a way that the cluster is unknown at that time, and just build an IP allocation, and then it becomes cluster specific from the moment we know where it gets scheduled to, right? So that's the way to think about it. So these are functions that execute upon the data that is available inside of the package, and only on that. And a kept function at the end of the day, standard in, standard out, standard error. So because you have all the data available to you, it's just, in this case, you could say it's a generation of another CR based on CR information that was already there.
Okay. Thanks. Wim, I think probably we'll understand more when we see it in action. But I understand the gist of it now. Thank you.
I can give you a quick example, maybe to give it to give you more context. So today in network attachment, what we are basically saying is, I need an interface, and I need it of this type. So I discussed last meeting. I don't know whether you were there. No, that's not the presentation. Okay, so in the presentation that we did last week. Okay, I did not edit. I'll add them to the library, but it's so there is a set of interfaces. So sorry, I'm coming to you ASAP, right? But so if you look into there, what is in there, it's basically saying I need a VLAN. So there is different interface types, right? There is what we call VNICs, loopbacks, and pools, if you will. Depending on them. So if you are a VNIC, you're actually an IP allocation of type network, and the name is known because the name is in there. And then you know the CNI type, because in there we also say it's SRIOV and what have you and so on. But so from there, I can immediately create an IP allocation that's because I know that I'm going to need an IP, but I don't know yet all the attributes, but I know already that I need an IP. What I don't know is to which cluster it is going to belong, right? And what is the site it will be scheduled upon, and so on and so forth. But at least I know already that I will need an IP. I don't know all the context yet. So as such, what I was proposing here is that from the moment you know that you need an IP, let's create the object, and maybe not all the metadata is there yet, but we can fill that out from the moment we actually go and schedule it. So as a result, so the difference will be that today we use that context to create this object. And so today what we do is from here plus this, we actually create this. What in this proposal would be is that we create from this, and then well, the moment we have the context, which is the cluster, in this case, there could be more, that we then expand this IP allocation with that specific context and do the allocation. So in other words, the IP allocation function would add the context plus do the allocation, or we could also do that in 2 steps or 2 phases. Whereas today we wait till we have this before we create that. So the difference between the 2 approaches is the following, because I'm maybe not explaining it very well. So the difference, just to give you a sense of what happens today. So we have a network attachment. That's not today, but what approach 1 would be. We get a cluster in the package. So this happens in the package management space. What we do at this stage, or one option is we have, this could be a function A. What it does, it takes this input and that input, and it generates IP allocation. Let's keep it simple. And then we have function B, which basically takes IP allocation. This will be a controller because it has to reach out, which does the IP. So this is the IP allocation injector, right? This reaches out to the IPAM and gets the IPs and fills out the status. So that is one approach. The second approach is we take network attachment. So this will be created. So let me change the color. I'm not yet good in, I think here. So this, sorry, wrong color. So, but okay, this gets created after by function A, and then function A creates it, this object, and then function B does the allocation. Another approach could be is that when we get the package in specialization, this is already created, right? Then we have 2 steps. Function A, what it does, it adds the context, and in this case, it will look at this resource and probably add some metadata, because when the IP gets allocated, we need to tell it to which cluster it belongs, right? Because otherwise you get an IP from a different pool, right? So the pool is selected. If you don't ask anything, we pick whatever is available. So if you want to pick an IP from a particular cluster, you need to add that label to it. And then, so this function basically, I could do context. So basically expand IP allocation with this cluster information, and then does the allocation. So these are the 2 options. So in this case, that object would change a little bit, and or we can do it all in one, or we do it in 2 steps. Okay. So these are these are the differences between the approaches.
Yeah, thanks, Wim. That makes it very clear. Really appreciate you helping me understand this. Yeah, I understand the difference in the approaches now. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Vish,
yeah,
next.
Sorry, I think I raised my hand. I dropped it again. I raised my hand. So the reason I dropped my hand was like I was out on vacation from March 10th, and then I realized maybe I should park my question till later. But then you showed a slide saying this is something you shared last week. One of the things, I think when the subgroups were formed, you guys were going to actually have some tutorials or something to get people up to speed. Is that what was done last week when I missed it?
Yes.
Oh, I see. Okay. Maybe I'll go through my Slack channel messages and come up to speed by going through that.
No, they are recorded. So the best thing is to go to the recordings of the meetings, I think.
Okay, cool. So good that it was done. That means we are going to be armed. if we go through that.
Now, okay, I'm not saying that
Everything is
we are-
together, Vish, in the YouTube channel. All the recordings are in the same place, so that's convenient.
Okay.
Yeah.
So specific for the specialization for your subgroup, Wim. So it looks like you did some sessions that we can go and look up on YouTube.
we did 3 sessions. We went to the code, but I'm not saying that it's fully done, Vish. We basically started. So if you believe that there is certain topics that would be of interest, what I'm proposing to all of you is to add a topic in the agenda so that we can satisfy that. You see what
Correct.
I'm saying?
Okay, because things like package invariant, I think was introduced about a couple of weeks back by Arvind, I guess, in his sequence diagram. And then I think John clarified that it is still not released yet, you know, so which are
Well,
new concepts,
it's-
right? So
Yeah, it's released, but what's released doesn't do everything that our controller that we built in the POC does. So it's designed to replace that, but it doesn't do everything. So I'm going to talk. Well, if Tal did on was it Thursday or Friday? Thursday, I think.
Okay.
Did a 2.5 hour session where he went through Porch and kept and really went through piece by piece. And so tomorrow I'm going to do a session, and I haven't put it on the calendar yet. I apologize for that. I meant to do it over the weekend, but didn't get to it. I'll do a session probably at 9 a.m. Pacific, and it'll be recorded. So if you can't make it, that's fine. But part of it'll be Q&A. Part of it'll be walking through a little bit of an example of how some of those pieces work, and how to sort of set up an environment where you can play with the things without necessarily having to set up the whole Nephew environment. So that's what I plan on right now. But like I said, or like Wim said, you know, it really should be guided by where the gaps in what we've communicated are, so what questions people have. So I'm hoping to get some feedback on that as well. But I'll probably set up well, anyway, for tomorrow anyway, since there's no workload cluster meeting till next week, I believe, that time slot's available. So anyway, I'll send out a note later today.
cool, thank you.
Yeah.
I got a lot of catch up to do.
Yeah, which we started to, we were
You
rocking
waited
and
for
rolling.
me to go on vacation and you guys
While you-
pushing a whole
while
bunch
you were on
of things.
vacation.
I can say our spring break fell on a really wrong week.
Yes, the spring break for us. I think I blame the kids.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Same here. Yeah. So just to expand on this particular question. So you put the example for IP allocation. It could be for VLAN or it could be for anything else. Too,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, I'm just making so the difference between this and my
Yeah.
drawing is really bad, but I'll fix
No,
it.
no,
is
it's
that-
much better than I can ever do. Yeah.
Okay, but so the difference between option 1 is that this CR itself will be created by function A with all the contextualization, right? So that is that. So I'll make it clear, but this guy is creating this object and this one acts upon it. Whereas in the other approach is that this object is already created, but not all the contextualization can be added when we create this. So we need potentially one function to add that context to I. So whether we do it in one function or in 2, we can still discuss, but there is indeed 2 steps to be done. This function will add that contextualization, and context in this case is which cluster. I make it simple for the time being. And then the second controller does the IP allocation, right? So there's a diff. So that is basically a first step here, which is not shown, which would basically, so this would be happening in the package management subsystem. I'm proposing to make this a tool or something, but a tool with cat function, right? But maybe there is other. So this is just a high level thought without any substance. So during package management, when we create a package, so this IP allocation is created, But given that it doesn't know the context at which it's going to be consumed, we cannot, so that's why we still need this part here. And then we have the controller. So that's the difference between option 1 and option 2, if you will. I don't know, anyone having an opinion on, or not at all at the moment?
Don't know much about this time to have an opinion, but hopefully once I go through
Ravi?
Hi, Wim. So I'm just trying to stitch everything together. I mean, so we have all the CRs that that was formally probably validated, right? I mean, the document with all the CRs where you have the
Yes.
open API document and stuff, and then we have this package variant and package variant set CRDs. So what I'm assuming is that what we had in POC1. In the POC for where you have the 5G core topology, all those CRDs are not probably applicable going forward, right? So is there one document that basically stitches all this CRDs in? Arvind had this document. I'm assuming that's also kind of one of the design document. Is there where we are putting all this together so that we can see the relationship between the CRDs?
At the moment, the best document I think there is the CRD spec, or the thing where you have all the APIs and there is that. Our goal, to be honest, Ravi, is that this documentation is going to be. This is part of our mission from the subgroups, and in this subgroup, our mission is to document what's happening in specialization with a lot of depth, right? So part of what we need to do is write the code, but second, we also need to write the documentation to explain how that works, right? Now, what I'm trying to make it clear, package variant set and package variant is not part of our subgroup, because that's handled by John.
Yeah.
So, but of course, what is important to us is what do we get from them? What do we get from the subgroup? So that's what we are trying to discuss here. So there is 2 options that we get on how such a package looks like when it comes to us, and that will determine how our specialization functions / controllers will operate. That's why I'm discussing it here. You see?
Okay. No, I'm just trying. No, I understand that part. Somebody, I mean, there are groups. I mean, there are 2 groups own 2 different levels of resources. I'm just saying that an overarching design document that basically stitches everything, that shows the pipeline. Is it like Darwin's document that is the logical?
Yeah, and so Aravind, I know that Aravind and Tal are working on a document to do so. The question that we have to ask ourselves also is, should we write it in the document, or should we write it in an MD file that will be added to Git? Our mission normally is that we should write it in a Git design document that explains how that would work, at least for R1, because what you see is we have these options here, right? We will probably pick one for R1, but that doesn't mean that it will be the only option. So maybe in R1, we have a documentation that says, okay, we use for option A or option B, right? So, and then we document that. But of course, then if you do release 2, we could say, okay, maybe in this circumstance, it's better to do this. So then we add that flavor to it. You see what I'm saying? So it's also work in progress, but it should be aligned with the release.
Sure.
And so what I'm trying to say is that I know that Aravind, because at this stage, it's much easier to use a document to make comments upon from the moment it's in Git. We also have to ask PRs or issues, and so it's a different process on how to update it. But our goal is to have all the documentation in Git at the end of R1 that explains not only what's happening in specialization or what's happening in each of the subgroups, but also how the overall thing links together.
Exactly. Yeah. No, because when you show this kind of isolated design choices, unless you link it to the whole pipeline, it's difficult to kind of comment. So, and so it is from that perspective. Yeah. Thanks a lot.
Aravind?
Yeah, I just wanted to add one thing. So there are two things we need, right? Like one is as we are kind of figuring out what is the best way to do, we need, I think as Ravi, right, mentioned something that kind of stitches this together. And then in that context, when we review the whole thing, then it is easier to kind of consume this and comment. But once it's final and we know exactly kind of the evolved document, then of course we need to put it in the GitHub and document it. But for now, for the three subgroups to kind of collaborate on, like it'll be good if something is there which is where we iterate on, right? Like, hey, step 1, 2, 3. There is a let's say 15 step sequence to deploy, and step 1 to 5 is, let's say, subgroup 1, step 6 to 10 is subgroup 2, steps 11 to 15 is subgroup 3, is the high level flow. And the benefit we get from that is the transfer. Like step 5 is package management ends at step 5 and package specialization starts at step 6, right? So if we at least agree in that 5-6 step across subgroups, these first two subgroups, then each of those subgroups can customize or do whatever they want 1 through 5. But the 5 to 6 transition we need to agree on, right? So I think that was the point earlier. On that note, we are working on a document using Vim's CRD, R1 CRD, to just try to put together like some sequence, but it may not be something that all of us agree on, right? The hope there is to kind of iterate and discuss through that and look at these different choices that Vim is presenting and see if like what all of us think, right? So at least we have started working on the document. It's premature at this time, so the plan is to share sometime soon. And it's just a document that stitches this together, and then we have to see if we all agree on it.
Yeah. Now I don't know,
yeah,
whether John is still on the call, but I would see that this part, if you look to this, that this could happen during the package variant functions piece, right? Potentially.
Yeah, I'm still here. So injecting the context, like we talked about, the cluster and node pool type of information will happen during fan out.
Yes.
That function, if there's a function that needs that information, it can pre-exist in the pipeline and just do nothing until all the information that it needs is available.
Indeed.
And then, so that's kind of what I'm thinking, is that the function that generates, rather than using a controller like we did in the POC, we can use a function like you're suggesting that generates the IP allocation requests, and then, but it sort of waits to do its business until it's got everything it needs. It has a condition maybe that it's controlling that says, hey, I can't do what I need to do, so we know we can't deploy the package yet. Something like that is what we're thinking. We will need to document sort of that. And it's really a package specific thing. So the way I think about this is we're talking about all these ideas, and all of these things, what we're trying to do is build capabilities into the platform, and then build examples of how to utilize those capabilities and develop best practices around how to do certain things. So like we'll have the capabilities. Even with those capabilities, there'll be 5 different ways we can do it. And we're still trying to figure out what the pros and cons are of each of those 5 ways, and suggest best practices. And that's all part of R1, is starting to sort through that. So in my mind, like, and that maybe is part of the somewhat the confusion, is that it's not so well formed yet. It's not like we know how to do it and it's going to be done like this. It's really, so drawing that flow that Arvind is talking about is one way, like you said, we all have to agree on it. It's one way to solve. We have 10 problems to solve. Each one of them has 5 ways to solve it, and we're going to decide on a way and see if it works. But we're trying to build those, discover the capabilities that we need to solve those problems, and then make a decision on the best way. So anyway, I kind of tend to veer off into philosophical nonsense, but hopefully that's useful.
Yeah. Now, the reason why I started to think about option A and B, because we did in the POC, we basically did A, right? Now, when I look at the
Yeah.
capabilities we are getting, or I potentially getting with the package variant set and package variant, if you look at B is probably more appropriate in my view, because or at least if those things work in my mind, because we could basically say, okay, let's say one scenario is, okay, we are not yet ready in R1 to basically run this as part of package variant. We could still run them in specialization, but the function will be the same. You see?
Right. It'll just, it'll just do nothing, or maybe it's a log entry, or I don't know exactly what we want to do. Like, we have this conditions thing, so we can say, oh, I as a function am not right, I don't have the information I need to run, so I'm going to set some condition to false, or maybe I don't know, and then when I run successfully, I'll set it to true, kind of thing.
Yeah. And I mean, and then so what I'm thinking is that, okay, if we do that, then whether we run at which point doesn't really matter.
Yes, right.
Because it's all this distributed condition, let's say, how do you call it, the way that it puts together is then
Choreography, I think, is the word.
Choreography. Yeah, that was the word that was.
Yeah, right. Like it's not everybody's kind of doing their own thing, but they just happen to coordinate.
Yes. Yeah. So that's why I was thinking on B, because it probably is more generic.
Yeah, I think is what I described, not B. I don't. That's how I understood this, but I was driving part of the time and I couldn't follow everything. Yeah.
Yeah, what you are describing is B. Yeah, I think. Yeah,
okay.
I think B is more generic. Is what I'm trying to get to.
Right. Yes. Right. Like, we're not building controllers that have to know so much detail about what the package is doing. Like, that's part of the principles for me, is like the functions we build and the controllers we build. They don't really have to know much about the package per se. They have to know about the resources that they are managing, and the humans compose those packages, maybe using a tool, and they know about those relationships, but the controllers and the code that's much harder to change than human minds doesn't have to know. Or much harder to change than packages, right? Packages are just sticking stuff together.
Because I think for me, I maybe this is or at least how I started to think when I saw the kept functions, so that inspired me. If you write code, at the end of the day, you actually execute a set of steps, basically, right? Normally, the way we are thinking, or at least that's one of the philosophies in Nephew, is each of these steps can be individual functions or could become an individual function. So that means that you can basically, and if you make that function generic, that it can not only do the thing that you need to do for that particular thing, but make it do or have it work in such a way that we can use it in other contexts, then we are on a very good path, because then we are on a mode where we can basically decompose and compose and use those things in a way that we can have reusable building blocks. And I think that's for me important in our thinking when we design something, to keep that in the back of our mind.
Exactly. And like those compute, this is part of the reason why, and I don't want to bring this, maybe I shouldn't even say it, but like one of the issues we're trying to, the reason why we're not embracing Helm super closely, is that it tends to promote the idea of building a package specific API or a package specific set of logic in the template. And that then only is useful for that one package ever. Yeah. So we're trying to make it a bunch of composable pieces that are reusable and building blocks.
Yeah. Okay. Any other question or comment on this? But personally, I'm leaning a bit more to B, personally, because I think it's more generic. But although we did A in the POC, but it was also because we had, that was the time window. So we kind of, okay, with that, okay, let's do this. So it was, but at the end of the day, you see that in both cases, B is the same. So we will not change B. What we are only discussing is how the first step could be decomposed into two separate pieces. Right? And what this function does is basically contextualization. So
yeah, and also, like you said, B is also sounds better in terms of more declarative nature, and then the providing the requirements. Different network functions could have different. Right now, we're only talking about UPF, SMF, and mostly we are talking about AP and VLANs and stuff like that. Obviously, I'm not a telco core guy, so some other functions may have some other requirements. And then with the concept of tool that you're explaining here, or maybe through the package management stuff, some of those requirements of the resources could be the intent could be explained better with option B, and then we could have specific resources, the specific controllers or injectors that is working on the resources. So in that way too, I think I like the option B.
yeah, because I see, just to make to maybe dwell a little bit too much on it. Actually, we have three things that we are doing, right? One is add an IP allocation, right? CR, right? That's one thing. Then we contextualize, we add context to that IP allocation. And three is we allocate the IP, right? Based on the context, right? So these are the three things that we need to, that we somehow do. In the POC, in option A, 1 and 2 are done in one function, and 3 is done separate. In option B, they are all happening in 3 distinct pieces.
Yes, yeah.
I just wanted to go through it because maybe it's a very simple case, but it actually, there's a philosophy behind that might be interesting for us to think and think about these situations.
Yeah, it's a design choice, right? I mean,
It's a choice, yeah.
I mean, like you said, we should also need to think about some of the toolings that could evolve. Also, I think design choices could matter. So I think probably, I think that's where I think your option B is tending towards that, to create tools, etc., based on the package management.
True.
And that's based on my understanding anyway.
Yeah, sure. And I mean, think it through. I'll share this slide I created on the fly. But I rather do it like that because then it builds up together rather than having a prepared slide with 500 things. All right, so I think we are a bit running out of time, but I think it was a good discussion. So if you have any topic on Wednesday, please add them to the agenda. So for the watcher, I'm proposing that we wait for the SIG automation meeting, so at 9 on Wednesday, for Stephen to explain. What I recommend everyone is look at the code already, because the code will tell us how it works. So that will also help, of course. And if things are unclear, you can ask questions on that. Because that's still a topic where we have not, I mean, I would propose that we look at the Google, that we take the Google Seed code and then take it from there, rather than reinventing something, right? So, but on Wednesday, so given that we have basically, yeah, Stephen on, so we do the watcher in Stephen's session at 9. We don't have a true topic at this stage on Wednesday. So if people have items, please suggest. We can still go to the IPAM and the VLAN allocation potentially. and yeah, take it from there. All right, thank you, and see you probably in SIG 1 meeting after this.
Yeah, thanks, Bill.
Thank you. Bye-bye.